none leading back the way he'd come. One of the guys at the back is shining his light around, kinda stops and makes an oh shit noise, then starts yelling. "You fucking dick, we've been worried sick about you." Rest of group walks over to look, and there's Tom standing a good 20 feet away. But he's standing all wrong. "You okay, buddy? You need some help?" Just stands there deadpan, then slowly nods yes. A few of us walk over and put an arm around his shoulders to kinda support him. Notice he reeks. "What the fuck, dude, we haven't even been out here for a full day lol." Laughs abound, except from him. Think nothing of it, except worry that maybe he fell and hit his head. Back at camp try and lay him down, but he just refuses to, so we let him stay outside at the fire. A couple of us go to sleep, but Greg, Vic, and I decide to stay up to keep an eye on Tom. Watching him, he does a weird jerk muscle spasm thing every now and then. Creepy shit, but think it might be something serious. He's mostly quiet, slow to respond to things, until it comes to food. We give him an MRE to eat, and he only eats the meat out of them. Shrug it off as whatever. Then he gets up and starts moving around all jerky-like, looking towards the woods. He asks us if we want to come into woods with him for firewood. Besides the fact that it's pitch black out beside the fire and the huge stack of firewood we'd collected on the way back, not all that weird. Jerks something like a shrug before walking weirdly into the woods. At this point we're on guard and don't try to stop him. Greg gets up a few minutes later to step into the tent for something, so I'm outside with Vic when the smell hits my nose like a ton of bricks and I gag hard. Then I start hearing gibbering and giggling. I've never been more freaked out in my life, and you can tell that Vic is feeling the same. Greg comes out in time to hear it really well, then goes inside to wake everyone up. He freezes at the tent flap, then starts cursing, which wakes everyone up. Dunno why he's cussing, but it's working. When they're all up in the wake he counts everyone, and you can see him turn. Apparently while he was inside he did a quick body count and there was 4 bodies inside. Someone or something had been chilling in our motherfucking tent, without us realizing it had gotten in. Shit bricks, and shit them hard. Then everyone starts asking where Tom is. At this time the gibbering gets louder, and you can hear a bunch of shit moving through the woods. We hear Tom's voice calling at us from the woods to come help him, but it's all off-key, and every now and then he'd start giggling. We build the fire up and sit around it with all the lanterns on full, weapons at hand until the sun starts coming up. Soon as it's up enough to see, we put the fire out, pack our stuff, and make for the vehicles. On the path back we find the 2 dogs, one impaled on a snapped pine, the other one with its neck snapped and twisted around. We start hearing the giggling, and the smell returns, so we start noping hard back for the car. We get there and there's scratches all over them, most of the windows are smashed out, and the seats are ripped to shreds. Whatever, that shit ain't important. Just need these babies to run. Toss keys into ignition and hear the sweet glorious sound of an internal combustion engine start up. Toss shit in, get in, and we speed out of there. Don't talk about it for a few months, and most of us don't admit it happened. One of the guys with us told me later that he'd seen Tom at the edge of the woods staring at us as we left with this creeping fucking grin on his face. I believe him. And I know that I'll never go camping that far away again without a lot more people than 6. That was my first run-in with skinwalkers. The second one is shorter, but I'm tired and I need sleep for work. I'll share tomorrow night. Until then. When I was 20, I was out of a job and didn't have any university or plans on going to university. I was basically lost in limbo without knowing where to turn next. I was living at home and spent hours on the internet staying up all night and sleeping all day. I was always a bit of an introvert that preferred the company of me, myself and I. Staying up through the night and disregarding the day was a way out of the norm and avoiding people altogether. Then I got the classic talk from my dad that all kids get when they're useless, sitting at home doing nothing. I was tired of hearing it, so I decided I needed to move out to continue my lazy, antisocial behavior. I have family way up north in the sticks. There is nothing around except a couple sawmills and a couple nickel mines. My grandfather has a piece of property that is over 350 acres of unexplored bush. It was hardly farmable, just a giant section of woods, streams, ponds and rock. My grandfather has a timeshare in Florida, so he was gone for the rest of the year. I called him and asked if I could go up there to live. In exchange I would do lumberjacking for wood to sell and use. I remember his comments exactly. "Yeah, I don't give a shit, you're wasting your time up there. No work, no school, no people, no internet. But if that's what you want, go ahead and knock yourself out. Just don't burn down my fucking house." My bags were already packed, I knew he wouldn't mind. I told my dad what I was doing. He was pretty much speechless and had a look of concern. He then told me I was wasting my life and should go to school. I told him it was what I wanted and needed to do. We parted ways. I got into my '93 Civic hatch that had a shot suspension and bald tires and took a 14-hour car ride to no man's land. I was happier than a pig in shit. I made myself good and comfy when I got to the house. It was given to my grandfather by an Irishman that passed on. He built the house with his family in the mid-1800s as a kid and been there ever since. If you ever seen the Amityville Horror, it looks just like that house but much, much smaller. The stove was an old, black cast iron beast. The kind you only see in movies or on an old historic village tour. It had a large barn full of tools and an old John Deere tractor, a smokehouse for mates, a large veggie garden, an outhouse, and a chicken coop that wasn't in use anymore. After unpacking and relaxing, the distance in fact I was alone began to set in. There wasn't a TV, internet or video game in sight. Luckily my grandfather had 2 snowmobiles, a 4-wheeler, a gator and dirt bike, and lots of hunting rifles and shotguns to boot. I figured most of my time would be spent outdoors, which was okay, but I was a bit nervous. The next day I drove into town, if you could even call it that. I stocked up on canned goods and cupboard food that could survive a nuclear holocaust. I came back and got to lumberjacking. It was slow at first to remember everything my grandpa had shown me as a kid, at about 8 to 12 years old, but after 4 or 5 hours I had it down pat. I'd take the tractor, chains and hooks, a jerrycan and chainsaw to the bush. I'd find a cedar or spruce tree, cut it down, chain it up to the tractor and drag it off to the main trail where I had a normal flatbed trailer waiting. I'd then cut it up into 2 to 3 foot sections and stack it. Once the trailer was full, I'd tow it to the barn, where in the back was a large, hydraulic wood splitter. I'd split it into 4 to 6 sections depending on diameter of the piece. Once I cut it all, I stacked it all. This was the routine. It was long and hard work, but it gave me a purpose and gave me joy. I thought of myself as a pioneer. I was in the great outdoors, alone, taking down trees and supplying villagers with something they needed to survive. I felt proud of myself, and made cash doing it. While I wasn't getting rich, I had enough for all the amenities that were needed to survive in such a place. I kept this routine for months, and locals began coming to me for wood because it was cheap, and I was a youngster looking after my grandfather's home, who was well thought of in town. Then winter on the farm was one of the most depressing times of my life. Not being able to do much work and have no interesting human contact or internet really brought me down. I reflected on my life and the fact I had no friends anymore because I had abandoned them with no warning. Why I did this, I do not know, but I had some type of mental feeling that I had to leave everyone behind and never speak to them again. I began having suicidal thoughts. The more I thought about offing myself, the more I accepted it as being an okay thing to do. I wasn't religious, so I didn't have the thought of going straight to hell. I viewed it more as, if a goldfish were to die, where do you think it would go? I think it doesn't go anywhere. It is just dead, blackness, no more thoughts, like turning off the car for good. I thought about how my family would miss me, and how it would hurt them. But I was so depressed, unhappy and discomforted by my progress in life and the fact that I had no one. After a few weeks of -30°C weather and brutal snow, I decided to get on a snowmobile, load up my snowshoes, take my rifle and go deep into the bush to end my mental suffering. I had given up on everything. I jumped on the sled at 8 a.m. The sun was brighter than ever. You couldn't look anywhere without squinting your eyes like an Eskimo. The sun reflected off the snowy landscape as if it were a mirror. With a full tank and a jerrycan as a backup, I could go a long ways away. I let the ski-doo idle and get warmed up. I was thinking to myself that I may actually go through with this. I kept going over what ifs and buts in my head, as if I were trying to talk myself out of it. I said fuck it out loud and jumped on the ski-doo and let it rip. I took the tractor trail as far as it would go into the bush. It ends after a solid 45-minute drive, then turns into four-wheeler and gator trails. I took a trail deeper and deeper. After a solid 2.5 hours of riding, the trail stopped and did a U-turn. It was the end of the track. I then grabbed my rifle and put on my snowshoes. I quickly realized something. I hadn't written a note for anyone to find my body or even know what I had done. I knew that if my parents had no idea what had happened to me, they would wonder for the rest of their lives and it would tear them apart. I yelled out fuck, and threw my rifle. I paced towards my sled and repeated what I said. I started to turn and remember I literally just threw my rifle. Shit. Get off the sled and walk towards rifle. I bend down and grab it and stand up, then froze stiff. A burst of adrenaline was injected throughout my entire body and turned my cold frame into a steel oven. There was a black figure in the distance hiding behind a tree watching me. It wasn't an animal. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't a man. I ran onto my sled and hit the throttle. I ripped back home and didn't look back. To get back home, it only took me maybe 2.5 hours. I rode hard. I got inside the house, put coffee on and ate fried bologna with beans and toast. As I pigged out, I kept that thing's image in my head and I was wondering what it was. How did it get there? For how long has it been here? Does it know I am here? How could it survive? Is it coming for me? Can it follow my snowmobile tracks? Does my grandpa know? I then decided to call my grandfather in Florida. He didn't answer his phone. He was probably chilling on the beach drinking beers. I thought fuck. I called my dad just to calm my nerves. He could sense something was off about me and asked me what was up. I told him I was out hunting and I seen something. I described what I seen and he went silent over the phone. He took a breath and he said, "Son, when I was a kid living on the farm, me and a girl went back to the lake for a swim. We got there on our bicycles in August. I had my rifle with me because of all the bears that passed through the land. After me and the girl were swimming around and laughing and doing our thing, she screamed and pointed across. I looked across the pond and there stood what looked like a burned-up human being. He was charred up, had a bit of head hair. Eyes as bright and blue as I had ever seen. Its arms were so long, its hands nearly came to its knees. It screeched at us with the most insane volume I had heard